Well, welcome everybody to the launch of our new Footprint Intelligence report. I'm Nick Hughes, Footprint's Associate Editor and the report's author. It's been something of a professional ambition of mine to launch a report in a pub, so I am very grateful to the good folk at the Howard Arms for hosting us today. Just to provide some context, I'm going to give about a 5-minute presentation sharing the key findings from the report, and then we're going to explore those findings in a bit more depth with an excellent panel. A bit of additional context. So last year, some of you may recall, Footprints published a report, again in association with Nestlé, asking the question, is regenerative the future of farming? For this report, we're looking at regenerative agriculture through a slightly different lens, the role of regenerative agriculture in the community. And the focus on the community is very important because for many farmers, the regenerative philosophy is as much about being rooted in place as it is being rooted in the soil, with farms forming part of a mutually beneficial ecosystem that also involves businesses and institutions and local people. Now, it should be said that in this modern era of globalized food supply chains and commodity crop production, the notion of farms being sort of part of the cornerstone of their local community can risk feeling slightly rose-tinted or outdated. And so we set out through conversations with farmers, with other experts and with businesses to really ask whether interest in regenerative agriculture among farmers and food businesses does indeed have the potential to unlock community benefits at scale, and in so doing deliver lasting social, environmental and economic benefits. The report is split into 3 chapters, so that in chapter 1 we ask who is part of this ecosystem that surrounds a regenerative farm. So firstly, most obviously, you have the farmer, and if in the case of a tenanted farmer, obviously you have a landlord. Then there are the people employed on the farm, either directly on the land or in where businesses have perhaps diversified into enterprise stacking into other enterprises, added value products, for example. You've also got people employed potentially in sales and marketing roles. Then there are the businesses that form part of a farm's local economy, as well as buyers of a farm's produce. That could be local buyers, ranging from bakers to butchers to local pubs or restaurants, but also national businesses who are looking to support regenerative farms as part of their wider desire to support regenerative food production. Local people are another key part of this ecosystem, often through their involvement with institutions like schools and hospitals and churches. And many farmers that I spoke with in researching this report spoke about how their adoption of regenerative principles has brought them closer to the community. And many, in fact, have started opening up their farms to visits from local school children or from local church groups, or even just through to interested neighbours who want to get a better feel for what's going on within their community. It's important to add too that one of the potential key community benefits of regenerative farming are environmental benefits delivered to the local community through improvements to the local environment. So that might be through a reduction in the use of pesticides and fertilizers, which can lead to an improvement in local air quality. Or it could be through investment in natural flood protection measures, for example, which obviously, again, has a direct benefit to the local community. So we then move on in chapter 2 to discuss how farmers can manage the change from conventional to regenerative farming and some of the challenges they face. And some of those challenges include, for example, peer pressure and the risk or the fear of being the butt of jokes from their neighbours who might be sort of persisting with more conventional practices. Again, that's something that came up quite frequently in conversations. And the other thing that came up quite frequently was resistance among family members to adopting regenerative principles, particularly where family members have always farmed a certain way and are perhaps wary about taking a risk financially but also socially as well, into adopting new methods. We also try and draw out some of the key features of a successful transition to regenerative farming, such as the ability to access and share knowledge with a wide community of like-minded practitioners. And finally, in Chapter 3, we dive into the role that businesses further down the supply chain have in supporting the shift to regenerative agriculture and unlocking some of these community benefits through their relationships with farmers, but also through intermediaries. As we know, we've got some caterers in the room, for example, that sit at the end of often quite long supply chains. So those intermediaries that sit in the middle of supply chains mustn't be forgotten. Their role in unlocking some of the community benefits of regenerative agriculture are important. These relationships might range from very small-scale projects. So you'll see in the report, we profile a fantastic social enterprise down in Sussex called Full Circle Farms, where the caterer Sodexo is renting plots of land for growing regenerative vegetables, and the money generated from that land is used to fund a community garden that is providing what the farmer Tom down there calls I have to remember the term, horticultural therapy, he talks about, to local people in need. So it's a really nice example of how corporate business support for regenerative agriculture can deliver really tangible local community benefits. And then there are the larger scale relationships, like the growing number of businesses, for example, sourcing wild farmed flour and bread. Azuri Group and Breaks, just two examples. There are many more as well, not least within the hospitality sector, and showing their support for regenerative farming through their procurement practices. Now, it's clear there's still a lot of barriers to mainstreaming the supply of regeneratively farmed food and drink, including current contractual and procurement practices and arrangements. And I think in particular questions around how the transition to regenerative agriculture can be financed. How do we share risk along supply chain so that the farmer isn't taking on all that risk themselves? And how do we value what the market doesn't currently value? Things like the things Lee talked about this morning: soil health, biodiversity, air quality. How do we make those values intrinsic to the price that we pay for food? The key takeaway for me from researching this report is that businesses looking to unlock the community benefits of regenerative agriculture need to try and get closer to farms and to farmers, and to really understand what it is that farmers need and what are the motivations of farmers as well. From writing this report and from writing last year's report, the idea of regenerative being a farmer-led movement has come across really strongly. This can't be a top-down approach around, businesses trying to control and standardize. It has to be a collaborative approach. And it almost certainly requires a shift away from a business-as-usual mindset. So that's a kind of top-line summary of the report's findings and some of the key themes. And I obviously hope you'll go away and enjoy reading the report in detail. But before we do that, we have a terrific panel assembled with whom we're going to unpick some of these themes in a bit more detail. So I'm delighted to introduce, from my far right, Richard Henderson. Richard is a local dairy farmer and part of the First Milk Cooperative, as is to Richard's left, James Smith. And we've spent a terrific morning on James's dairy farm just down the road this morning, learning about rotational grazing, herbal lays, and many other things besides. So James, again, is part of the First Milk Cooperative. Next to James, we have Sobia Nahid, and Sobia is Responsible Sourcing Manager for Nestlé UK and Ireland. And finally, to my immediate right, Lee Truelove, who is Head of Regenerative Farming at First Milk. So in the spirit of putting the farmer first, Richard and James. James, I'm going to come to you first because we spent the morning on your farm, and thank you very much for hosting us. The report is about the community element, the community benefits of regenerative farming. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about how you see your farm's place within your local community and the relationships you've developed with local people and institutions and businesses.
Yeah, I think, I suppose there's a lot of, I guess, working parts on the farm that require outside assistance. So, for example, you've got someone comes and takes away the milk, for example. You've got to hire someone who's going to drive the lorry. Your tractor breaks down, you've got to ring someone else up who's going to come and fix it. Contractors will bring in, if you don't have the machinery, they'll come in and silage the ground for you. So I think off the back of agriculture, there's a lot of other industries within the local economy that actually benefit from that, and it creates a lot of work and a lot of jobs for people locally in the rural economy that there maybe wouldn't have been if a farm wasn't there. I think particularly dairy farming as well requires a lot of people working on it, because, for example, a big arable farm, you could probably manage quite a large land area with just a couple of people, whereas dairy farming, there's, I guess, a lot more moving parts. You've got cows to manage and feed and move them around on the grazing platform, as well as maintaining fences, making sure all your machinery's well maintained as well. So I think there's a lot more labour involved in that, which, again, local labour is really, really helpful, because I suppose farming is not the thing you can, well, if you live on farm, you're working from home, I guess, but it does require people in the local area to work on the farm.
And Richard, you farm not far from here, a few minutes down the road. Would you say that since you've adopted regenerative principles, that in itself has sort of brought you closer to your community and the kind of the ecosystem of sort of local suppliers and buyers that I was talking about at the start that sits within that ecosystem?
Yeah, definitely, because we're trying different practices on farms, so there's always questions coming from the neighbours as to, oh, why are you doing this? What are you seeing the benefits for? Not just neighbouring farmers, but just general members of the public that are asking questions, or why are our cows in grass that's so much longer than everyone else's? Heading along on the regenerative journey, we're trying to put the information out there, and we host lots of meetings and events on the farm that we try and encourage many other farmers to come and be at. And it's the same thing where we're trying to sort of show how something can be done differently, but also it's a very positive scenario for the farmers, and the farmers that are leaving, that they're going away with new ideas and hopefully challenge what's tradition and step onto the regenerative journey themselves.
So yeah, let's zoom down the supply chain a little to Nestlé's place within that supply chain. What benefits does a business like Nestlé derive from the relationships that you've built, not only with First Milk, but also with farmers like James and Richard?
Yeah, sure, certainly. For Regen Ag, if I would say, first of all, the core, since we are discussing in the morning, the core for implementation of such initiative is basically a relationship with the farmer. And we are lucky we are having a very long-term relationship through First Milk Partnership. Of course, it's over 2 decades, and farmers have a long relationship with us, and that's something really helpful us to achieve the ambitious target. For us, basically, as a business, Region Ag is one of the core activity with the partnership of our suppliers and farmers, which is really helping us to achieve the net zero journey. Because because we are aiming to achieve 50% reduction by 2030, and we are also aiming to achieve 50% ingredient raw material will be coming from the farmers who are actually practicing the region ag practices. So these kind of targets we can only achieve with the close partnership of farmers, because that's something for us, because if I say it's more than 60% carbon footprints are coming through the ingredients, and fresh milk is one of the key contributor for the local market if we talk about, and milk plan under that really helping us through the partnership of Fresh Milk and farmers, that really help us to make a real difference. And since the partnership is very long, but we started milk plan, if I talk about particularly about that, we started in 2021, and within the journey so far we have achieved over 18% carbon reduction versus 2018, and we are aiming to achieve 45% by 2025. So this much this is only possible with true partnership, with close working with the farmers, that we really believe. And at the same time, if I talk about others, for example, if we talk about working closely with the farmer or region is actually supporting business to increase transparency and traceability for the brands. And that gives us a very strong story to share share to the brands that have from where the milk is coming, what is inside. If we talk about a Kit Kat, so what is inside from the milk is coming, so we can really correlate. And this is vice versa as well. For example, farmer Richard and James, they can easily see which factory is taking milk and which brand is actually coming out of this milk. So this is exactly not only giving us a traceability and transparency to increase the consumer trust, but also in strengthening the relationship with the farmers, because they better own from where the milk is going and which product is actually making. So I think that's something, a very strong thing, which gives a real sense of ownership on both sides. And not there are many, but I think I would like to highlight one more, which is very important, is to create a resilient supply chain. It's very important, because very few people really understand the word resilient. There's a lot more happening behind that, and we truly believe in order to embed into the communities, to creating shared values, as well as to create a resilient supply chain for future, this journey is really important for us.
Leah, we'll come to you in a moment, but I just want to pick up on something that Sobia was talking about with James and Richard, which was this idea of traceability and having visibility over where the product that you're producing goes to. And it's something that struck me researching this report was one farmer described it as the difference between producing a commodity and producing food, just the knowledge of where that product was ending up. How do you express that? And does it feel more rewarding to you knowing what the supply chain looks like and where the milk that you're producing is ending up?
Yeah, I've been in a situation where we've just been supplying milk to another milk buyer that's just been pretty much drying it and putting it into a 25 kilo bag, and then off it goes. And I didn't feel any connection to the end product, and that was really my catalyst for leaving that company and searching out someone like First Milk, where it's traceable, yes, and there is this clear line from the farm to the end product, but actually it's having that sense of belonging and that pride in the product, the end product, what it is, and you can't really put a price tag on that, and it's just a sense of it's just a better sense of well-being, knowing that line of sight is there.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Richard there. It's sometimes if you're talking to people, where does your milk go, and then being able to say, actually it goes into XYZ product that actually most people know of, and they kind of get it. That's it, and it's quite satisfying to be able to say, I sort of helped get that to to where it is. Yeah, makes me feel proud.
Lee, we talk in the report about how farmers can manage periods of change, particularly in the context of transitioning from conventional farming to regenerative farming. From your position at First Milk, what do you see as the key challenges involved for farmers in making that transition from conventional to regenerative, and how can you help them manage that transition?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think the first thing we do is allow farmers to move at their own speed. So the Nestlé Milk Plan isn't a blueprint that everybody follows. It's a process of options that they could choose to be more advanced in some areas than others. But across the entire 80 farms, everybody may have a different plan, but they're all going in the same direction. And there are farmers such as James and Richard that might be more advanced at grazing, but there may be others that are much more advanced at resource use or energy efficiency, so they can learn from each other. And our view is regenerative farming shouldn't be a standard or, as I say, a blueprint, because there are so many bespoke situations that are unique to that farm that nobody designing this blueprint could get right. The farmer is the person that will best adapt to the situation. So we need to focus on outputs. A carbon output is reasonably easy to measure, a water output, a biodiversity output, but also connected to your report is the social output. And I think that if you take agriculture's lack of communication with the consumer and the barrier that we sometimes talk about, some of that is because possibly we've become more too technical, too specialized, and we now sort of lack the narrative to explain what we're doing. Whereas I think regenerative farming gives a story and a narrative that you can then be proud of the communication. So you then embrace people coming onto the farm because you can tell this story positively.
The notion of community, as we talk about in the report, it's not just about locality, it's also around becoming part of a community of like-minded people or practitioners or farmers. And I just wonder if you can talk a little bit about how at First Milk you you facilitate sharing of knowledge and learnings and successes and failures among your farmer members, and the value that being part of that network has for the farmers themselves. And we'll obviously get perspectives from James and Richard on that as well.
Yeah, it's critical. Regenerative farming, in one way is very familiar because you need to look back a generation or two and a lot of the principles are there, but it's been lost from the sort of consciousness right now. So there is a risk aversion to trying what feel like new things, and seeing somebody else do it is better than any expert or any paper that could be written by a scientist. So farmers are very happy to both try things but also share those learnings. And I think this is where what Nestlé have done with us is enabled us to start to implement regenerative principles at scale, whereas others have done trial or pilot farms. So they may have 100 farms that will try something on 5. Our view is everybody needs to have their own trials and then share the outcomes. So we have a next generation group which can share stories. We have a women in agriculture group which enable a totally different perspective to come to farming. And we have workshops and farmer mentors. So farmer mentors, Richard being one, is quite happy to visit others. And we have farmers that are saying, well, I don't necessarily want to visit other farms, but I'm open for them to come to me. And I think that matrix of different ways of learning is really important because, we all learn differently, don't we?
Richard, we were discussing briefly beforehand the WhatsApp group. I was at the Groundswell Festival earlier this year, and Andy Cato, the co-founder of Wild Farm, described the WhatsApp group as the hive brain of Wild Farms. There's 100-odd farmers all constantly messaging each other and sharing learnings and challenges. What's it like being part of the First Milk WhatsApp group? But more broadly, how what is the value to you of being part of this community of like-minded farmers?
Yeah, well, this WhatsApp group it's based mainly around grazing farmers, and like you say, having that like-mindedness, it helps. But you often need outliers within the groups as well who can put in an objective opinion. But yeah, how you coined it as a hive mind, it absolutely is. And I can't really think back before WhatsApp, if you like, where how were we doing this beforehand? And my dad will have been involved with discussion groups that would maybe meet once a month or once a quarter, and generally it was just an excuse for a drink. So it was a social event, and I'm not sure how much actual discussion around farming happened, but having that instant response from a multitude of different farmers, it's absolutely invaluable. It really is. And you do, again, you're back to that community, a sense of belonging, and nice to know that someone else is going through something similar, and that you're not totally isolated, because we are quite isolated on our own farms, if you like. And having that other way of communicating, it's invaluable. Yeah, it really is invaluable. Yeah.
James, do you feel similarly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really good to be challenged, and being part of these various different groups. You kind of, when you're on your own farm all the time, you kind of think, oh, this is the way I'm doing it, and it's right. And just being able to get off farm and go away and see how someone else is doing it, and realize that actually they're maybe doing something better than you are, it helps you kind of come back home a lot more refreshed, and you try out these new ideas. And I think as a whole, everybody gets better then, because you might be doing something that other people can learn from. And yeah, I think that exchange is really quite crucial to how, or at least like my development anyway. I think it's been key. Yeah.
Sobia, we're talking about knowledge exchange and sharing learnings, and I'd be interested to hear from you in terms of Nestlé's facilitation role, if you like, within this. We touch in the report on the Allerton project, and also the High Suffolk Farm Cluster, which is benefiting from support from Nestlé Purina. What value do you see as a business in supporting these, I guess, knowledge exchange programs, and also, the sort of ability for farmers to test and learn and take risks in the knowledge that there's not going to be a huge negative repercussions if they do so.
Yeah. So since we are already discussing, region ag is something which is a science as well as a complicated subject, and it requires it is implementing in a constantly changing environment. So it requires a right set of knowledge and expertise. It's not only for farmer. I would say it's throughout the value chain. Every value chain player needs to upgrade the set of skills to manage it properly. For example, if we talk about the production level, of course, that the farmer needs to learn and practice certain set of skills to implement that successfully. Similarly, if we go out of the farm till factory, the transportation system, that also requires to evolve, and that needs to understand how we will be transporting in future the region ag produce to the factories, for example. And within the supply chain, if I talk about the buyers within the company, and if we not only focusing as a company, we really understand there is a need to upgrade the skills and knowledge set for supporting function as well. Allerton is one of the project which is actually supporting us to this initiative was started primarily with the to upgrade the skill set of our employees. And in first year, we have trained more than 200 Nestle employees, and those were cross-functionally. There was not only procurement department, that was finance, HR, legal, so all support functions. We understand that there's a need to upgrade their set of skills so that they can better understand or become a part of this journey. And Allerton project is, I would like to say, is one of the project which is actually Going forward, we are trying to focus more farmers and our customers. So since the customers are sitting here, so I would like to say this is another opportunity. We would be welcoming more customers to bring next year, so that's something would be, and we are also trying to upgrade the training from 1 day to 4 days, and next as per the customers our value chain players need. So I think knowledge exchange and skill set embedding into the value chain, it's highly important, and it is not stick to one point. It is throughout the value chain, and everybody needs to have that right skill set to implement that journey successfully.
And Lee, final question to you, if I may, and it's not going to be a straightforward one, I'm afraid. Can regenerative farming be adopted at scale while remaining rooted in local communities? Or with scale, does there inevitably become greater standardization and centralization and distance put between farms and communities?
Yeah, quite a complex one, Nick. I think the first question is how do we define scale? Because a large farm in India, for instance, won't be a large farm in the US or the UK. I think the basis of regenerative farming being embedded within its place is that you reduce your externalities. So the farm is more self-sufficient. You implement things that are more resilient. Therefore, you require less purchased inputs. And I think then you have a sort of an investment cycle. I'll invest in the land, I'll invest in the community, because these are the things that will bear the test of time. And the scale then is almost what is the natural holding capacity if I reduce my externalities. Whereas I think what we've done now is almost, if I've got enough resources to be as big as I can be, regardless of the holding capacity. And then we've seen, particularly in terms of river landscapes and watersheds, how we've gone beyond what that area can sustain by importing products from around the world. So I think, the scale has to be more aligned to what is the natural capacity of the landscape, rather than, if you like, how big the business is, because status quo isn't sustainable. So we do have to push ourselves into a new future.
Terrific. Well, on that weighty note, thank you very much to Richard, to James, Sobia and Lee. The report should be available to download right now from the Footprint website. So please do download it, read it, let us know what you think. We're always welcoming of feedback. And thank you very much for joining us here today.